Hello everyone and welcome back to our blockchains course. We looked at two industries. We looked at financial services, we looked at supply chain use cases. And Professor Sandeep will be talking about government and public sector use cases. But I just wanted to give you a little bit of a flavor on various other industries in which blockchain is being used today. Just sample examples, I won't go into too much detail. So the first industry we look at is healthcare. So it's again a very blockchain is slated to make a very big impact in the healthcare industry today. So some quick use cases in the healthcare space, right? One is patient consent and health data exchange. So I'll give you an example, right? So today, let's say I've gone to a particular hospital that I usually go to. They have my medical history with them, so it's great. Whenever I go in there, I get any doctor I meet there in that hospital immediately has access to my medical history. But let's say I'm traveling and I'm going to a different hospital, maybe a different city. Now, for God forbid, let's say an accident, and I get into an emergency situation, and I'm rushed to a hospital there. Now, that other hospital has no idea who I am. They have no information about my medical past. There's information as to whether I'm diabetic or not. Some of that kind of information is very critical in the kind of medicines you can prescribe to that person. So one of the use cases that is making waves of how blockchain can make an impact is health data exchange. So what if these hospitals can all talk to each other and are able to exchange information about the patient with each other? Of course, this is all private information, so it has to be stored very securely. And it also has to be, it's private information about me as a patient, right? So then it requires my consent or the consent of someone I authorize. And only after they provide that consent can the data exchange happen, right? So that whole process of consent and data exchange can be something that can be captured on a blockchain. And because this is all private information, it's highly secure and needs to be audited, blockchain provides that capability as well. So later on, the bank can prove that in fact they did get the patient's consent before exchanging the information. And the patient can also feel secure that their information is guarded and they have the rights to disclose their information. So they can determine when and who they disclose that information to. So that's again a very big use case that many people are looking at, and there are people looking to put this out in production as well. So the second kind of use cases are around payments and claims. So of course, healthcare is very closely related to healthcare insurance. And of course, there's a very large amount of money that's involved. So of course, when I go and get healthcare from a hospital, the hospital will expect me to pay for it. And I'm insured, and so the payment, or at least a large portion of that payment, will come from the insurance company directly. So there again, there is actually multiple parties in this ecosystem, and fraud again is a big part of this. So can we automate some of these claims processing and payments on blockchain? And we can actually think about very new models in which insurance can be provided with some of this information coming on blockchain and some of that automation coming in. The third use case is around the pharma supply chain. I think I briefly mentioned this in one of the earlier lectures. There was also a video I had in the fun reading section. The pharma supply chain has a lot of traceability aspects as well as compliance aspects, right? So there are very strict rules on how pharmaceutical goods have to be transported across. Some of them maybe have to be refrigerated and so on. So there are compliance rules on instructions, business instructions on how to process these things across the supply chain. And we want to be able to trace that. Again, a big problem, very relevant to India as well, is counterfeit. It's estimated that about 25% of the drugs out there in the market today in India is actually counterfeit. And that has a serious implication on safety as well. So if you're taking counterfeit drugs, it can actually cause health issues for you. So we want to be avoiding some of those issues, right? So patient safety is foremost, and we want to avoid counterfeit drugs. So imagine if you can go to a pharmacy, and when you're buying that drug, you can actually scan it, and you can verify it across an entry in the blockchain where the actual pharmaceutical company that produced that good as well as the company, the logistics company that transported that good, both give you proof that they were indeed the ones who handled it, and they tell you how it actually came into being. So you know that it was not counterfeit, for instance. And there are also regulations involved. So a regulatory authority can immediately have visibility into this. They can verify that the due processes have been followed. And then there is a whole area around clinical trial management. So today there is information that is getting exchanged between multiple entities on clinical trials. So today, if you think about it, about pharmaceutical industry again, if they look at maybe 100 different maybe molecules or whatever they use in drugs, maybe only one of those 100 trials might actually be even they might even take it to the level of producing a drug. Once they produce a drug, maybe out of that 1%, maybe 0.2% might actually be something that will get to a retail store. The remaining 0.8 might have side effects, might have other issues that might not eventually make it to the retail store at all. So all along the way, from the time something is detected as having a medicinal property, till the time a drug is produced, to being verified, validated, and actually coming to a retail store, there's a lot of steps involved, a lot of management and documentation that happens there, and of course fraud also. And we want to be able to track and trace this whole clinical trial process itself. So that again is a big use case in the healthcare industry. So this is the patient-mediated health data exchange I briefly talked about in the previous slide. So what are the steps involved? You want to be managing consent from the patient. So the patient is the one who has to come in and maybe digitally sign a transaction and put it on blockchain saying, I am authorizing this particular hospital to access my health records. So there's a consent that's placed on blockchain, and there is an exchange of data that is compliant with the records. So it's only that patient's record that is getting shared from maybe hospital A and hospital B. I'm using hospital in a generic sense. This could be any kind of healthcare provider. It could be other institutions as well. And the patient will be able to have a 360-degree view, as well as a hospital can have a view of all the patients that they manage. Right? So all of this can be provided. And a similar use of this is, for instance, once this kind of healthcare information is associated with a blockchain, it's also possible to use some of that information for clinical research again. Right? For instance, let's say you're studying cancer patients, right? Or you're doing cancer research. What we could do is actually anonymize that information. Again, you can provide that proof on blockchain that the data has been sufficiently anonymized. It can be aggregated, and then it can be used for research. And again, that audit log of how it was anonymized, aggregated, so that private information is not disclosed. So that you're not disclosing the fact that this record is actually mapped to this particular person, real person in this world. So if once you've anonymized that, then it might be okay to use for research. And it happens today that this kind of medical information is used for research after anonymization, but now blockchain can come in and provide the proof of such exchange. So there's a very notable startup called Godtime. They're making waves. So they're doing a very good job in this space. So they partnered with the Estonian e-health authority in 2016 to actually secure patient records in Estonia. Think about Estonia was a very small country. It's actually not that hard for them to capture medical records on blockchain. Estonia has also been in the forefront of leveraging blockchain for various use cases. And Godtime actually worked with Estonia and Thailand, among other countries as well, to secure government public records, which also have a similar flavor to healthcare records, but maybe healthcare is a lot more stringent in terms of regulations. But you can imagine the same thing with government public records as well. So they've done some good work in that space. They're also active in many other industries, including supply chain finance and insurance, right? But what is most interesting for me about Godtime is the fact that the founders of Godtime, at least some of the founders, were the ones who actually proved way back in 2004 some of the security properties of hash chains, of how if you chained multiple transactions together so that the second transaction has the hash of the first, the third has the hash of second, that's a hash chain, right? So they actually were the first to mathematically prove some of the security properties of hash chains back in 2004. So you should look them up. They have a very nice website and a simple explanation of their technology itself. Right? So it's a very cool startup in my opinion. So another use case which is also being very, very popular, lots of startups in this space, is loyalty points exchange. So think about this. So this is again work that we've done with China Union Pay, but it's just representational. Many other people who've done a similar use case. So think of in today's world, there's a large fraction of promotional points or these reward points that never get utilized, and that is actually wasted marketing in some sense for the entity that's actually providing these reward points. But what if we had an ability to exchange reward points across multiple businesses? This could be, for instance, multiple banks coming together, and they all have a mechanism by which I can earn points in one bank but actually redeem it in another bank. Right? That would be cool, right? So they have this kind of a consortium of banks coming together on a blockchain platform where end users can actually earn reward points or loyalty points from any bank in this consortium, and of course they can redeem it for goods and services of any approved provider across all of these banks. So this is just a simple representation, shows the kind of process. And there's actually a nice startup in the space called Loyal. So they're doing a lot of interesting work in the loyalty points exchange space. Okay, yet another industry, right? So the intent of this is to show you the extent of reach of blockchain, of how various industries are looking at blockchain for a variety of use cases, of how blockchain can transform their use cases, their industry. So energy markets. So so here, let's say there is a microgrid. Maybe this is solar, right? So there may be homes. It could be small grids that are existing that are all connected with each other in a small microgrid. So these microgrids are actually emerging today. India is also very big in the solar space. We're growing, and the Prime Minister has set a target for us by 2022. So there is these microgrids which have a need to match supply and demand again between producers of power with consumers of power. Then maybe some of this excess power might get distributed across, and there's a smart distribution phase. So there may be transmitters and so on that are involved here. And then there's a core grid along with storage and bulk generation. So this might be coming from thermal power plants, and it's connected to that. So this whole ecosystem consists of smart grids, smart homes with maybe smart meters that are involved for instrumenting. It might be buildings as well, office spaces, distribution sector, and storage, right? So all of these are involved, and what we want to do is intelligently match supply and demand. So, and once we match supply and demand, we also want to have a payment go through automatically. So what people are looking to do is, in some sense, assetize the energy units. So each time, if I am producing, let's say, 10 units of energy, I will get 10 tokens, crypto tokens potentially, back from this market, from this ecosystem, and I can exchange that crypto tokens for money. Likewise, if someone wants to purchase power, they will have to first purchase crypto tokens, and then they can exchange those crypto tokens for actually energy assets, right? So that kind of a whole marketplace is coming into being. There's a startup called Tenet. They're working with a couple of utility companies. And their core goal is exactly this. They're matching supply and demand of electricity, and they're actually doing this for renewable energy. So they have some of these utilities they're working with have wind farms where they are producing energy, and they have battery technology which enables you to temporarily store energy for a certain period of time and allows you to instantaneously adapt the requirements needed. So basically, it's managing supply and demand here. So if your supply is in excess, you would store that temporarily and then serve future demand. And they also have a bunch of electric vehicles connected to this ecosystem, And then these electric vehicles, you can determine when to charge these electric vehicles based on maybe whenever there is excess supply. Right? So this whole flexibility of matching supply and demand in a almost near real-time basis on blockchain is what this company is trying to do. Right? So again, they are looking at cost benefits and real-time visibility into supply and demand as their core use case. In the media, so in the media industry, again, there's a lot of active work going on about leveraging blockchain for the media industry. So today, artists, let's say I am an independent band, or it could be, let's say I'm a producer, a music producer. When I sell my content, I might be hosting it on, let's say, YouTube. I'm going to take the YouTube just as an example. Today, I'm fully trusting YouTube to tell me how many people viewed my video or audio. And based on that, YouTube will give me on a pay-per-view basis, right? So each time my video is viewed, I get a certain amount of money. So now I am dependent on YouTube to tell me exactly how many times my video was viewed. And there's a lot of instances where producers, artists have complained that they're not getting a fair share for their content. So this interesting startup, Yujo Music, what they're doing is they're based on Ethereum. It's a platform. We've not discussed Ethereum yet. We'll talk about Ethereum later in this course. But they're based on Ethereum, and it's backed by what they're doing is they are bringing licensing and payments onto a blockchain platform. So think of it as a content producer will place their music or maybe a hash of that music on a blockchain and say, I'm making this content available for people to view. Blockchain will track how many times people viewed this content, and based on how many times people viewed the content, the producers can get paid for it. Right? So this ensures that there is fairness across the ecosystem. No one party is going to cheat the other of their due. The buyer of the music gets exactly original content, so they can verify that this content was actually prepared by this legitimate producer. The producer has a benefit that they get exactly for how many times they get paid for exactly how many times this video was viewed. And there might be a facilitator or a market provider who is going to be providing the infrastructure and the services listing of the videos. They provide the infrastructure to be able to actually stream the videos from the producer to the consumer. Right? So this whole ecosystem can be again tracked on blockchain, and you can ensure fairness, and you can ensure automated payments and so on. Right? So that's a very interesting startup looking at blockchain in the media industry. So just some fun reading for this course, for this lecture. So one on how blockchain can streamline healthcare, so just 3 minutes. But if you are looking for a more detailed view of how blockchain can impact the healthcare industry, there's a 33-minute version of the video as well. It's a longer video. So this, the next one here is actually the paper, the Godtime's, what is now Godtime, their paper back in 2004, which talks about how some of the security properties of hash chains and how they can keep data secure. So this is a fairly rigorous paper to read. I would give you that word of caution. So I would recommend this if you are probably pursuing a PhD in security perhaps, then it might be a useful read. I have to admit that I only understand this from a very conceptual level, right? So I don't understand the math. So I've myself not gone through this in detail. But if you're pursuing a PhD in cryptography or in security, I would encourage you to read this paper. Right? And there's another interesting startup called Power Ledger, which is again doing decentralized energy trading. They have a nice video on YouTube, just 8 minutes. You can take a look at what they're doing in the energy space. With that, thank you. That concludes the set of lectures we had on various use cases of blockchain for a variety of industries, and I hope I was able to give you a flavor of how blockchain has a very far-reaching impact on various industries. Thank you.